we talk a little bit about identity in this role? Because I know John Assaraf is a big believer you cannot create a different future while holding on to an old identity. Can you explain that one?
Yeah, especially with the way we're raised, we develop this identity of who we are. And we tend to, our ego tends to apply labels and leaves us in that place where we're stuck and we're really not sure how to move past that. And one of the things with journaling and with meditation is learning how to let the ego go and learning that we can be who we want to be and feel the way we want to feel and let go of those things that are not good feelings to us, and learning how to be happy. And if something is not bringing us joy, then maybe take evaluation of it and look and see what might bring me joy as opposed to what's in my current situation. And it does involve making changes. It involves taking those hard look at things and knowing what's working and what's not working, and being able to figure out how to leave what's not working behind and move towards what is. But the biggest thing in achieving that is letting go of the control and learning to follow the signs and follow the information that's being presented in front, and having an open mind about what that's trying to tell us.
Yeah, I love that. And it's interesting how I would get stuck in a paradigm where I would be feeling really bad or poorly about a situation, especially if I couldn't achieve it. And I can remember asking myself one day, who am I in this situation where I feel like I can't do this, where it's too hard? Hey, and welcome to this week's edition of the Genius Zone. Now, when you talk about turning pain into power, believe you me, this is definitely a reclamation. This is a place and a space where in this broadcast, you are going to learn how to turn victimhood into victory. So, we're all about turning pain to power. I want to introduce, with absolute honor and pleasure, Staci Wells, this beautiful coach who's been through so much in her life, who has followed alongside of people like John Assaraf and Rhonda Burns in The Secret. And you would be the best person to speak about when it comes to bringing people out of whatever fear they've been locked into and negative relationship, and bringing them out into their space and place of power. So welcome aboard, Staci.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Terry.
And I guess, kicking off with the authentic story of 40 years of domestic violence. Wow. That is a long time to endure that. Can you talk me through what that looked like and how that shaped your life?
Well, I was brought up with a very controlling mother that thought that everything was her way or no way. And following in her footsteps, and I knew that something that didn't feel quite right to me, but I never knew what it was. And I had grown up with a sibling that was treated very different than I was. And as I've grown to learn, the pattern was with her mother, with my mother's mother, and the relationship between her and her sisters, very similar to the relationship between myself and my brother. But I was always filled with a lot of shame, like that I wasn't supposed to do this or behave this way. And I just always, I guess the biggest emotion that I felt through all this was shame, and then also fear, that she put a lot of fear in me, that if I didn't act or behave exactly as she wanted me to behave, that there was always consequences, and that I didn't really have a voice to speak on or wasn't allowed to make my own decisions. And once I, grew up in that environment, at that time, that was all I knew. And so then I ended up marrying someone soon after college that basically treated me the same way my mother did.
Wow.
And that, as I've learned through therapy, in later years, that once you get caught in a trap of domestic violence, it's a cycle. And so it's a cycle that there's violence, and then there's always a period of, I guess, joy or, happiness, that they create this false sense so that you think, oh, it's going to get better, and you don't want to leave. And then it goes right back into the violent cycle again, and being, feeling all that shame and that fear all over.
Wow. Yeah, look, I absolutely am hearing some big themes here going on. Firstly, I feel like family patterns do repeat. Like they say, history doesn't repeat. Well, I completely beg to differ in this role, because I'm watching, like, even the relationship, like I am blessed in as much that I did not grow up in that same kind of scenario. But there is no such thing as perfect families, and anybody that tries to say that is they need to either check their pulse, or they're going to have a nose from here to Timbuktu. They often call Pinocchio from telling too many lies, because in our family, it was a good family, but I can see very, very similar patterns from the generation that I am to the generation that has gone before. But then you've talked about being locked into that kind of a control situation with a mother that it's like it's my way or the highway. And later on, we're going to go into manifestation. So the manifestation process, people are going to learn from you how they can actually transmute that pain to power. But it's not about what people think. I think quite often people think, oh, you've just got to put your goal out there and wish for it to happen. But we're going to be touching on how you understand signs and learnings and identifying the triggers and the patterns, and then following the path of least resistance. But to move me on to, I guess, my first question here, I guess victim, when you think of a victim, and I always say, don't be the victim of your history, be the master of your destiny. What do you believe your purpose was to go through what you did? Because you also met with a childhood sweetheart or someone in your young years who completely repeated on that. So obviously you still had lessons to learn. Do you understand? Did you come to understand what those lessons were?
I did eventually. It's taken probably the past 20 years to learn, to figure everything out, and to learn all those lessons that I was supposed to learn so that I could help others, navigate their journeys, and hopefully not take 20 years to get past them.
I was just about to say that. This is the part where I love, because this is the part where people hire people like yourself so they can stand on the shoulders of giants. So I believe that there's going to be a call for people that are locked in fear and locked into very, I guess, abusive relationships here, where they're undergoing a lot of control, and people are returning back. Have you ever heard of that, or noticed how people quite often will either return back to that victimhood, or they will repeat the same thing with the next person that they're with. Can you kind of talk me through that and what's going on in people's lives that they kind of get stuck in that cycle, and what can they do to break it?
Well, if you follow the teachings of Abraham Hicks, they talk about vibration and how you vibrate at different levels, and you need to move on to certain vibrations in order to attract more of what you desire into your life. And if you don't change your vibrations, then you continue to get stuck in the same patterns over and over again. And part of that also is learning like what the signs are, learning what the triggers are, trying to figure out whether, you feel comfortable in your environment, or if something feels off or feels uncomfortable, but then also knowing once you hit that point, which direction you need to go to get past it or to overcome that. And what techniques do you use to start raising your vibrations so that you start attracting more of what you desire or what you manifest into your life?
Oh, I love that. It doesn't mean that we are to blame for everything that has happened to us.
Yeah.
However, I believe what Staci is saying is that it is there for a reason, and you can change your vibration. And the vibration, you talked about a lot of shame that you went through, and that was actually a familiar spirit to me as well. And what I discovered myself is that the shame that I was living in through my life actually stemmed from my grandmother. And I did find that out through timeline therapy. So, the shame is actually one of the lowest frequencies. Mm-hmm. And you talk a lot about how to shift that through journaling. Can you talk me through if somebody is going through a low vibration, what do they write in their journal? A lot of people don't even know. Are they writing, I am powerful, I am good, or are they actually speaking the truth? And then is there some kind of magic formula?
I mean, obviously journaling affirmations is a great way to start raising your vibration. However, part of that is also knowing what feelings you're feeling at the current moment, in order to know which affirmations speak to you clearly. Also, it's hard to just know how to jump right into affirmations. And so the first step I would recommend in journaling is to write out how you're feeling right at this moment, and really understanding why you're feeling those feelings and where they're stemming from, because they might be stemming from your current situation, or they might stem from past situations, but they just continue to linger and you continue to hold on to them because that's what feels comfortable to you.
Oh, absolutely. I love that, because true, people tend to sit in their mud because that's comfortable. And I love that you have talked about journaling about what the feelings really are, because, I guess I was being a bit facetious by saying, do we just try and jump in over the top of a really negative feeling and say, I am happy, I am powerful, I am this and I am that. But we know that there's no point squashing what is underneath, because it's going to be suppressed and you're not going to get the full effect. So you're a very strong advocate on identifying these triggers. So what are the kind of questions a person can ask themselves when they're going through something in their life and they really have to kind of, I guess, well, they don't have to. However, if they want to have a breakthrough, they can look at identifying their triggers. what are the questions, and can you lead us through that?
Yeah, I mean, I would start off with what emotions am I currently feeling? And then once you've kind of, taken along, and it's not something to write down quickly. It's, spend 5 minutes and kind of really process and really think about it, because some of those feelings are buried deep down. But if you don't think about them, they're not going to come to the surface. And so really think about what emotions you're feeling, write them down. And then once they're written down, think about how you feel about those emotions and how those are making you feel right in the moment. And that can kind of give you an idea of why you're feeling the way you are.
Absolutely. That's very deep. So, for example, a lot of people don't know how to call out their emotions. And I think if we're going to get back to basic foundations, it's really saying, well, how do I feel? So if you say, I feel unworthy or worthless, then what Staci is saying is then ask yourself again, what does it feel to feel unworthy? And then you might go helpless.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you're identifying a couple of emotions in there. So how deep should they go? Do you feel, because I know that quite often I'll keep going with people and say to them, for example, well, what does it feel like to feel helpless? And they might say powerless. And then I might say, well, what does it feel like to feel powerless? Would you say for them to go that deep, or would you stop at about two emotions?
Usually, I mean, five times is a great way, because then you're really digging deep down to find those emotions. But a lot of times to go 5 emotions deep is not something that's easy to do by yourself. It's not something that you can continue to journal. And that's where the help of a life coach comes in, because then we can talk about not only how that feeling makes you feel, but why do you think you feel that way? What triggered that feeling?
Yeah, and of course that's your genius zone, really understanding that and identifying that trigger. And what do you think happens in a person's life when they do? Like, you've obviously identified some triggers yourself in your own life. And, can you talk us through how that has helped you personally?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know that right now, financially, I'm in a place where I never dreamed 20 years ago where I would be. I've just recently started a new relationship that's nothing that I have ever experienced before. It's just, life, my wellness plan, where I used to say, oh, I think I'll start this exercise routine, or I'll start this, healthy eating plan. And then you do it for a couple days. And then those old emotions kick in. And all of a sudden with me, it was emotional eating, or it was, that feeling of being tired and depressed, when I really wasn't tired and depressed. I was just frustrated and couldn't figure out why I wasn't motivated to reach my goals. And all of that plays a part in things. And until I understood what was holding me back from achieving all these things, I really needed to deep dive and really figure out what that looked like in order to move forward and to raise my vibration.
Wow, that's so good. So don't try to stifle the dragon, rather embrace the dragon, or embrace the problem, and look at it and learn from it before you move on. And you really are a great believer that people's circumstances do not define them.
Exactly.
Yeah. Can you talk me through that and what that means? Because I do know that people will get stuck in a rut because they feel that they are a result of their circumstances.
Exactly. And we're always given a choice, whether or not we believe that we have a choice or not. We are always given a choice, and we can choose to stay in our circumstances, or we can choose to find a way out. And it's finding a way out, which I did by myself, took 20 years to figure out. And I would hate to see anybody get stuck in circumstances and take the 20 years like I did to figure out how to get themselves out of it.
Oh, absolutely. So you are not the emotions that you feel, nor are you your circumstances. And I know that, Staci, you are firsthand at knowing and understanding how, if we do not turn the triggers off and identify these issues, then in the present we could be speaking to a friend or a person who may trigger us. And can you talk me through, or talk our audience through, how that works, how we can become triggered and react in the moment because of what's happened in our past?
Exactly. Especially when we allow our egos to get in the way, which is something that just seems to come naturally anymore. But you're having a conversation with a friend, and a friend says something, and it could be a very neutral conversation, but they're talking about, as a situation where they had, and um, they got upset, and it could trigger your emotions as well. And then you get upset, and then you get mad at that friend for bringing up that conversation when they were just maybe confiding in you or having a neutral conversation, and you react as opposed to going, oh, maybe I felt something similar in my life, and I'm stemming from those emotions that I'm harboring from that conversation.
Wow. Yeah. So we kind of react rather than respond.
Exactly. And then it can cause, I mean, it can blow up into something, cause hard feelings, maybe possibly damage relationships that we really didn't mean to damage, but because of what is going on inside of us that we haven't identified yet, we've caused a situation to happen that maybe wouldn't have had, had we known about what was going to trigger us, and then learn how to manage those triggers.
Yeah, yeah. And I love also how you spoke to me backstage about following symbols and signs. So let's kind of look at what we've spoken about. So we've spoken about, firstly, identifying the emotions, asking ourselves questions, perhaps journaling them so we can get it from here out on paper. And then we're looking at really learning from that and understanding what those emotions are about. And all of this is going to change the vibration, obviously. So you then talk about following signs and being able to have that flexibility, rather than saying, I want a Rolls Royce and I want to live, in Puerto Rico, in that jungle, on that island, and be so specific. Can you talk us through how you have learned manifestation really works through signs, symbols, and the art of least resistance?
Sure. So, it's easy to read books. I know that one of the first books that I read was John Assaraf's Having It All. And in that book, it definitely talked about, manifesting your dreams and your goals and such. But there's a point where manifestation is not thinking that, oh, this is what I want, and then just sitting there and think it's just going to come to you. There's, you still have to work at things. You still have to be focused and be mindful of what is coming across you. And sometimes like assisting in these manifestations could be something as simple as reading a headline and, for an article that pops up on your Facebook feed or something that actually like gives you ideas or gives you purpose for the day, or following, I know I follow signs in nature. I'm really big on following hawks, and if I find a hawk, then that symbolizes that I'm, on the path that I'm supposed to be on, and that hawk's there to kind of help guide me through that path. It's, who comes into your life, being open to, having open conversations with people that you don't know, and they may say something. It could be something as simple as standing in line at the grocery store and you just have a casual conversation with somebody, but they would say something that would kind of make you go, I never thought about that. Or, you just never know what you're going to learn from anybody. And it's just following these, but it's also, looking at your goals and asking yourself questions like, how do I think I can reach this goal? Or what do I need to do to work towards this goal?
Yes.
And then all of the signs, as you start working on that and start journaling that, the signs then kind of find a way um, into your universe so that you can start listening to them and paying attention.
I have really had that scenario happen since the passing of my husband. I have really been able to read signs and symbols, and the amount of wisdom and some of the profound insights that I have gained, whether it is that I come to know that a loved one is in trouble, or whether it is that I make a decision that actually changes my life. And I have most definitely, I can say this from firsthand experience, that following those signs and symbols, it's like becoming really aware of who you are in your life and becoming super present as well. And I feel that that's probably one of the biggest elements that I missed when I was looking at manifestation. I feel that, it's not just about visualizing what you want, where you want to go. It's about being able to recognize where you are now. And like you just said, what is it going to take for me to get there? How can I achieve that goal? Because, the subconscious mind may not give you the answer straight away. However, it will give you the answer. Can we talk a little bit about identity in this role? Because I know John Assaraf is a big believer. You cannot create a different future while holding on to an old identity. Can you explain that one?
Yeah. So, especially with the way we're raised, we kind of develop this identity of who we are. And we tend to, our ego tends to apply labels, and leaves us kind of in that place where we're I hate where we're stuck, and we're really not sure how to move past that. And one of the things with journaling and with meditation is learning how to let the ego go, and learning that, we can be who we want to be and feel the way we want to feel, and let go of those things that are not good feelings to us, and learning how to be happy. And if something is not bringing us joy, then maybe look, take evaluation of it and look and see what might bring me joy as opposed to what's in my current situation. And it does involve making changes. It involves, like taking those hard look at things and knowing what's working and what's not working, and being able to figure out how to leave what's not working behind and move towards what is. But the biggest thing in achieving that is letting go of the control and learning to follow the signs and follow the information that's being presented in front, and having an open mind about what that's trying to tell us.
Yeah, I love that. And it's interesting how, I would get stuck in a paradigm where I would be feeling really bad or poorly about a situation, especially if I couldn't achieve it. And I can remember asking myself one day, who am I in this situation where I feel like I can't do this, where it's too hard? And, all of a sudden, a vision of myself as a child in year 3 with my year 3 teacher, Mrs. Ford, who called me daydreamer and actually made fun of me in the class. And I feel that really stuck with me. And what I didn't realize before, what you're talking about here, about awareness being the first step of transformation, of course, is that old identity I was holding on to. So, if we learn to ask ourselves the question too, who am I when I am playing out that fear? And, healing your past allows you to stop repeating unconscious relationship patterns. So you've moved from 40 years of domestic violence, and you had another relationship too, just to put icing on the cake, where you were you found out that you were stuck in a whole lot of lies. And, what happened there, and how did that feel? What was it like to suddenly be in a relationship where, you were there? Because we're going to obviously quantum leap to where you are now in this amazing relationship and prosperous. So can you talk to us about what happened there?
Yeah. So I had reconnected with someone that I had dated in the past. And instead of, I guess, taking the time, it had been 20, 30 years since, we had dated, because this was before I had gotten married, and thinking that, we're just going to pick up where we left off, which was a poor decision on my part in the beginning, but that was kind of the way it was. It turned out that this individual had a severe drug and alcohol problem and continued to hide it from me for years in this relationship. And then the relationship just turned into a life full of lies and deceit. And, this person had a whole other life that was being hidden from me. And it caused a lot of frustration, not knowing what was going on, or not really fully understanding what was going on. And I think a lot of the reason why I was kind of overlooking some of those signs was because I was working so hard to work through the other part of my journey, with, my career and my wellness, and working on those aspects of things. And the relationship started to become second nature. And because I was ignoring the signs that it was telling me, I started to feel defeated, and I started to feel like all the work that I had done to move past these situations was all for nothing, and not realizing that biggest trigger that I needed to overcome was not allowing the people to be who they are in their place. And then I get to choose whether or not I want to spend time with that person, or I don't want to spend time with that person. And once I figured all that out, I realized that I don't have to spend time with this person because they're not making me feel good about themselves. They're not supporting my journey. They're not supporting who I want to be and where I want to go in life. And not only that, turned out to be the biggest financial drain that I had ever felt. And once I got past all that and broke free from that, it's totally changed my life around. It was that last piece that I needed to fully understand that I was worthy of what I wanted, and I didn't have to let somebody else take that away from me.
That is so good. And of course, fear loses its power when you understand where it comes from. Mm-hmm. And yet I believe that you mentioned a key word there for anyone out there that is stuck in a hostile relationship where you do deserve better. I think so many people are just wishing that it would work out and wanting to give it a chance so that they can make peace with themselves, and because it's comfortable and it might seem too hard. However, the longer you leave it, the longer you become immersed in that and become used to it, and it starts becoming like your normal. And you do not have to allow anything that is not uplifting to become your normal. In fact, becoming, there's a saying that whatever you tolerate, you'll get more of. So I love that you're teaching so much around the fact that awareness and turning off those triggers is where you're going to step into your power, because that's where you can start to have a quality of life and reflect on the quality of your beliefs. So do you believe that prosperity does stem from self-worth? Because you've come into prosperity and you've been where you've been. So is there a correlation between prosperity and a person's self-worth?
I would say definitely. I can, I have these words of my ex-husband embedded in my head. And it's one of the things that, instead of being victimized by it, it actually motivated me by it. And he told me that if I divorced him, he would make sure that he would not stop until I was living on the street in a cardboard box. Those were his exact words. And I had made up my mind that no matter what, that was never going to happen. And I guess that's what motivated me to go on this journey. And because the biggest thing to me was, I'm going to prove him wrong. I'm going to prove to him that I am worthy of having a lifestyle that I choose to have. And, which for me includes, traveling. It includes, doing the things that I want to do and not being so financially strapped that I can't even go to a ball game or a concert because I can't afford the tickets. And it was just really eye-opening to just continue to work at it and to watch the signs and to focus, then when I, going through that last relationship and finding out that, oh, there was still some things that I hadn't thought about or I hadn't uncovered. And then once I got past that and everything opened up, it just, like in a matter of 6 months, my entire life just completely turned around to the point where I still look back at it and go, oh my God, I can't believe this just happened.
That is incredible. So, there's a lot of people that are doing this, they're going around and around in that dwelling and that repetitive pattern. However, Staci's here to tell you, and all of the information, if you want to get in contact with Staci, is in the show notes. So I will remind people that you can break through anything. Do you feel that there is a one fear that people are usually dealing with? Because I noticed that, on your bio, it's living life fearlessly and overcoming your number one fear. Can you talk me through that?
Yeah, I mean, here again, everybody's number one fear may be different, but especially with women, the biggest fear is that self-worth, that fear that they're not worthy or they don't deserve better. They don't deserve what they want. They, need to live by somebody else's guidelines or somebody else's dreams and not their own, even if they don't, if somebody else's doesn't align with them, but yet, oh, okay, well, this is just the way it's supposed to be. And so I would say self-worth is a big one. Another one is fear of change. I mean, everybody's like, society has us believing that change is a terrible thing. And change can be very good. It's just sometimes it's difficult to maneuver because we're all in these routines, and change changes our routines. It makes us step back and go, oh, I can't keep doing this habit over and over because, it doesn't fit in with my new routine. And it could be even something as simple as changing, job changes are huge, but then even in a current job and changing job responsibilities or job duties, or changing what time that you go to work in the morning or you go later in the afternoon, however that works, but then having to adjust everything else to accommodate that. And that all of that makes people feel overwhelmed. And then then it creates this uneasiness, this unrest, and then we want to recoil back and not follow through with the change because of everything that's involved with it.
Yeah, yeah. And obviously you also were a great advocate for the book The Secret, and that came out a long time ago. I think that was like 2005 when that came out, and Bob Proctor, Rhonda Byrne, and a whole lot of people sort of came together. What do you think was probably one of the biggest takes that you took from it, that you believe, because I know there is about asking, so ask and you shall receive, or your intention, I intend to attract healthy, loving relationships, or belief. And what do you believe is your biggest take from that?
Probably my biggest takeaway from that is understanding that I can, like, whatever I desire or I dream, I can achieve that. And I have the power within myself to make that happen. But I also need to know that there are changes and small changes in my life that I needed to make in order to achieve that. Like, I couldn't continue on my current path because it wasn't working for me. And so what changes did I need to make for that to come to fruition?
So that comes back to the journaling part again as well, and asking those questions like, what is it going to take for me to have an incredibly enriched relationship, or to be highly respected, or what is it going to take for me to have ultimate health? And so obviously we might get an answer back that we don't like.
Exactly.
Or we may, and what happens in that case? Like, what if it comes back that it's saying, well, you need to be more assertive, but you're a really passive person, or you're a people pleaser and you don't want to speak up for yourself?
So once again, when those things happen, I mean, that's where a great coach comes into play, because all of a sudden you realize, oh, I'm still being a people person and I don't know how to change this part about me, or I don't think that I deserve to have what I want, that I'm going to make somebody else happy. And maybe I'll feel better because I made somebody else happy, even though that's not really a benefit to me, that's benefiting somebody else. And it's hard to recognize some of those tendencies and those things about our personalities and whether or not it works for us. And so that's where a great coach comes in. They can kind of help you, look at the different sides of those things and see if that's really what you want, or if there's something else or another direction you need to go.
That is amazing. So really it's about setting your intention and, having a great coach that can work with you through some of your trauma, some of your stress. However, if you are, doing this alone, I mean, I feel like, children ought to be brought up in a village. I feel like it takes a village to bring up a child. And I do feel that we are made to be united in community. And so accountability is a really big piece of it as well. So what about action? So what kind of massive aligned action do we need to take? So for you, obviously you took some action where you kind of had to draw a line in the sand and walk away from that relationship. Is that the kind of action? And how do we know? Is there any ways of understanding if we are called away from a bad job or a toxic relationship?
Usually, I mean, a lot of it is how we feel emotionally. And when we start to feel those really heavy emotions, and it's not something that's, a moment, or, it might maybe last a day, but all of a sudden those emotions tend to hang on and you can't shake them. And then that's when people start self-medicating through drugs and alcohol, or binge watching, TV, and not, taking care of, even simple household chores. And all of those things are, uncomfortable ways of being, but then they become familiar. It becomes easy to just fall into that situation, because it takes work to move away from things. It takes work to decide, to make changes and to implement those changes and to move forward. And that's something that's just very difficult to do. And it just needs to take the right steps in order to move forward.
So just to summarize here, so for people who may just want to really encapsulate what we've been talking about here, it's the power of awareness and understanding your patterns, whether it's unhealthy relationships, financial struggle, self-doubt, fears of rejection, fears of abandonment. That's a big one. Identifying triggers. That's what Staci has also really advocated for. So identifying what triggers you, because as you said before, if we don't identify those triggers from the past, we're going to be kind of playing them over into our present, and we may be overreacting when in fact, the person in front of us may not have deserved it. So I always love to ask this question. However, as you've talked about turning off those triggers, changing the vibration, really being able to journal and being honest with yourself, what would you say if you had something that you would really want to share before we close? What would it be?
I guess the first step in identifying what you feel is your best life and wanting to move towards living your best life is just start writing things down. Start writing down what your goals are, what your fears are. What do you think is limiting you from achieving or reaching those goals? And then just start moving forward, start looking for signs and opportunities and people that, cross your path to work towards that, and just continue, don't stop, just continue to work towards it. And you will be amazed at the changes that you'll see in your life.
Oh, that's beautiful. So getting clear on what you want, asking for it, and not denying that you've got some stuff going on in the background that you need to address. So you need to clear that, because if you don't clear that, it's like trying to build a house on a rubbish dump, and nobody wants to do that. So feeling the emotions, now you practice a lot of meditation.
Yes.
Do you agree that people, when they're journaling and feeling their emotions, is that going to help them feel what they're wanting to put out there?
Identifying even negative emotions helps us understand why we're not happy or we're not content in our lives. And then that also helps us understand what we need to change and which direction we need to go to find that ultimate euphoria, or the things that create the most happiness and joy in our lives.
Oh, that's beautiful. So yeah, find that euphoria. I love it. Find the natural dopamine.
Exactly.
And release the fears and follow the signs and the path of least resistance, and take massive, aligned, inspired action. Staci Wells, I am so privileged to have you on this show. Thank you so much for everything you've brought to the show today.
Well, thank you, Terry. It's been great. Thank you.
A show where we have explored through this various topic, along with all the exciting new topics that we bring every week to enhance your personal mastery of excellence. Now, I'd love you to do me a favor. In fact, be part of the legacy 1 million that I have in the vision for 2028. If you know someone who really would benefit from this recording, from this episode, please share it with them. And when you subscribe, you get notified every week of our episode as soon as it drops. So let's do that legacy thing. Let's share, let's care, let's enrich. And I look forward to bringing you another week of the most enriching content. So until next time, stay inspired, stay awesome, and keep on mastering your excellence.